Welcome to the Bible Feed podcast, a place for conversations about the Bible and faith in the modern world, where ordinary people come together to help each other understand the Bible better. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Bible Feed podcast. My name's Dan Weatherall and I'm here with Paul Davenport, and we're going to continue a discussion on the book of Revelation, aren't we, Paul?
Absolutely, we are. And we're going to try and get our heads around the whole book in half an hour and kind of get the structure of it.
The whole book of Revelation in 30 minutes. Or it's not going to be 30, it's probably going to be a little bit more than 30 minutes, but you know.
Let's be realistic.
Okay, yeah. So, you set yourself, or you set us both a real challenge this session. What we did last time, in the previous Revelation episode, was really good. It was more of a step back, let's think about the type of book, the genre, and the background and things like that. So we had a bit of a discussion about the place in the biblical story, the place of the book in the biblical story, didn't we? About, at the turn of the era of the apostles. So after Jesus and after the apostles, sort of towards the end of that. And really with an expectant community of believers, been sort of promised Jesus was coming again, and he's not coming, and there's suffering, there's persecution, there's all sorts going on. So that sort of situated the book, didn't it? In that place.
Yeah, and that kind of transition period. Yeah. From one generation to the next.
Yeah. So, and what we're trying to do is trying to hear the book of Revelation as it would have been heard. That's kind of the overall aim, isn't it? The objective. It's so easy to, in any part of Scripture, but especially Revelation, I think, so easy to dive in and just start thinking what different things mean for us. But actually, there was a real audience. There's 7 churches in Asia. So we talked a bit about that. Yeah,
and we picked up that it has features of a letter. Yeah. From beginning to end. Yeah. And therefore, a letter has a recipient, has an addressee, and it means something to the people that first heard it.
Definitely,
We're trying to pick up that, listen to it through their ears, as it were.
Yeah, that's right. There was that key verse, wasn't there, in chapter 1, verse 3. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and keep what is written in it, for the time is near. So we kept referring back to that. And then there were the 3 T's that you introduced me to, didn't you? So I need to try and make sure I remember them. Target audience, so we've talked about that.
That's definitely one of them.
It's one of them. Time,
and then kind of where it sits in time, historical context.
I hope that was right. And then what was the other one? Type, so genre. So a letter.
The type of writing.
Type of writing. Yeah. So with apocalyptic literature sort of elements to it, which we might see a little bit more of in this episode, I think. And it's a prophecy as well, isn't it? As in, it's urging the people of God, the followers of Jesus, to react to it. It's God's prophetic word. Yeah. So we've got to hear it in that context to try and work out what it might mean for people today. What's the message we can learn from?
Yeah, and I think that's our challenge, is to try and hear it as it would have been heard, and try and get a sense of how people hearing it for the first time would have reacted and thought, this is expecting me to do X, Y, Z. Yeah. And look at the world in a certain way and think of myself in the world in a certain way. That's our challenge.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so you said we want to think about the whole book then. So that's the background. Now let's think about how it's all structured.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to do for this episode. We'll just think about the thing as a whole and think about its different parts and the structure, the flow of it. I want to give credit to something that I found very helpful in getting to grips with the structure of the book of Revelation, it's an essay article written by Richard Bauckham.
Okay, yeah.
The article's entitled, or the essay's entitled, "The Climax of Prophecy," or I think that's a collection of essays. And one of the essays in that is specifically about the structure, and he just pulls out some really helpful points about things to pick up on in the text of the book that are structural markers and just help to put it together. And they're probably the kinds of phrases that when you're hearing it read to you, that you would pick up on. Maybe not all of them first time, but maybe second or third time, you start to hear these structural section markers, and that helps draw out the message of the book. I think it helps us just to identify the different parts and how they are connected. What to treat as kind of a sequence, because it is, even though we're picking up on, or we're trying to pick up on, what would you hear, what would you pick up on as a hearer of this book, it is still a very finely woven, crafted piece of literature that draws you into deeper analysis and study and thinking about particular phrases and why they are alluding back to the Old Testament and in the way that they do. So it operates at a number of levels, as we might not be surprised to find with an inspired piece of text.
Sure. Yeah, so it's not something they would have sort of sat down in, the people in Ephesus or Thyatira sat down and heard it read aloud and thought, okay, thank you very much for that, and never read it again. It would have, it's been preserved, hasn't it?
And it's definitely something that draws you into deeper reflection and study on what it's trying to get across. I mean, and it is, in that respect, it is a work of art. It's a little bit like you see in any other work of art, like films or books. There are markers which tell you what's going on and how things are structured. An example of that might be when in a film it jumps back in time. The first time it does it, there'll be a little caption that says, 3 years earlier, and you see the characters, but they're dressed differently, and you notice that. And then it jumps back to the present, and then it goes back again. It doesn't tell you. It just, you see the same marker that, okay, now I understand we're going back in time again. That sort of thing. And there are markers like that in the book of Revelation that we'll try and pick up on, and hopefully it will help us figure it out.
Yeah. So different repeated phrases and things like that. That's or repeated ideas and themes that keep coming up. So we've got to try and be alert to that, and try and spot those. Even in different parts of Scripture, that happens as well, doesn't it? I talked a little bit about that in the Matthew series that we talked about. Things, the collections of Jesus' sayings, and there's a marker that identifies that. So. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. So I'm quite looking forward to this. I think we should dive straight in then, and
let's get into it. Yeah.
See where you lead us.
Obviously, we're going to try and cover this in half an hour or so, and pick out these key structural features. We're not going to get into any of the detail. I've kind of done it as a diagram on a piece of A4 paper that I've got in front of me. I'll talk through it and describe what I've written and drawn on my sheet of paper. I'm not an artist. You're probably more of an artist than me. It'd be quite interesting to see from my description if other people were to try and, listening to this, draw out what I'm describing and see how close they get.
Yeah, I'll give it a go.
So let's try and do that. So, blank sheet of paper. Title at the top, The Book of Revelation.
Sorry, portrait or landscape?
That's a very good question. Portrait.
Oh, okay. I've gone wrong already. Okay. Right. I had more than one sheet of paper. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be A4. It could be letter, foolscap, I don't know, legal paper, whatever else. So we said last time that at the beginning, it starts like a letter. We've got this little prologue about this is the revelation of Jesus Christ, and then John to the 7 churches in chapter 1. And then in chapter 1, verse 9, I, John, your brother and partner, and so it gets into it. And then we noticed that there's something similar at the end in Revelation chapter 22, I think from verse 8 of Revelation 22. I, John, saw this, and it finishes with John saying, the grace of the Lord Jesus be with all. Amen. Which is similar to how a lot of the letters finish.
Signing off,
we can kind of do, prologue right at the top of the sheet of paper and sort of epilogue right at the bottom.
Yeah.
And we can link those two. They are linked. It's just a line down the side of the page. This whole thing, the Book of Revelation, is bracketed by an introduction and an epilogue that is like a letter. So the thing is a whole. It's not bits and pieces for different purposes. The whole thing is a letter. And we talked about that being relevant because it means that the whole thing, in some form, carried a message, a prophetic message for people that heard it and the people to whom it was read.
Okay, good.
Good with that?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
So far, so good. The next thing that we pick up on, back in Revelation chapter 1, in verse 9, we've just started this verse. I, John, your brother and partner in tribulation and the kingdom and the patient endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos on account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and then he starts to see and hear things. Mm-hmm. So there's this phrase, I was in the Spirit.
Okay.
And that pops up, I think it's 4 times through the course of the book. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be a phrase with something else that goes with it, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is a structural marker. It's like, when I hear that, I was in the Spirit, it sort of marks a new section.
Okay. Or
a new perspective. So we'll just have a look at the others, and you can kind of draw a line across, almost at the top, to represent where we are at chapter 1, verse 9, a line across your page.
Yep.
And the next time it appears is at the beginning of chapter 4. So if you just go down about a fifth of the way down the page to chapter 4, another line across where this section starts. Chapter 4 starts like this. After this I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this. At once I was in the Spirit. It's also got this phrase, come and look at this. Come and let me show you this. And I was in the Spirit. So that little section marker seems to be here's a new perspective, a new way of looking at things that I'm going to give you. Okay. Yeah.
So in the Spirit is more of a structural thing. I mean, what does it mean practically? I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Is it this kind of, I'm having this new perspective? Is that what you're? I'm in the presence of God. What's it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I guess it describes whatever vision state John was in when he saw and recorded and wrote these things. I mean, how exactly the transfer of what he saw onto the page of what was written, I'm not sure is very clear.
No, okay. But so probably the important thing about that is noticing where it appears more so than trying to work out what it physically might have meant for him. So that's what that's helpful.
I guess that's, Yeah.
Okay, so I've got my line across at chapter 4.
Yeah, and then it doesn't appear for quite a way through now. It doesn't appear again until the beginning of chapter 17. And it's kind of similar to chapter 4. It says, come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters.
Okay,
well, let's forget about the prostitute for a minute.
Yeah.
And then it goes into verse 3, and he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and he sees whatever comes next. So there's the same kind of thing again.
Yeah, it's like turn the corner.
Come and let me show you this.
Yeah. Something else. I need to show something different now. So yeah.
Let me give you a different way of looking at something that we've described before.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
And we can look at an example of that. So chapter 17 is kind of like, I don't know, 3/4 of the way down the page, line across. That's one section. And then the final time it appears is chapter 21, verse 9, which is right near the end, really. So, and again, it's the same kind of thing. Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing. Let me show you something new, something different. And that phrase is there again. So that's right near the end.
Okay.
So now we've kind of got those sections. So how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4 sections, really. But there's a big one in the middle that runs from chapter 4 right through to chapter 17. We can perhaps just look at how, let's go back to chapter 4, because you talked about turn the corner and look in a different direction.
Yeah.
In chapter 4, John is invited to come up here and see what's going on in heaven.
Okay.
And there's a throne, and there's a figure seated on the throne. So the different perspective there is what's going on in heaven. What's the perspective from heaven rather than from the earth? From God's point of view rather than humanity's point of view, I guess.
So he's almost in the vision. He's sort of physically transported from one place to another, but that's not a literal moving around, is it? That's his vision, that state that he's in. So in the spirit does help clarify that this isn't him being whisked up into some real heavenly realm where these things he sees are sort of literal things. This is all a symbolic representation of how he can look at things differently because it's from God's perspective. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that the role of heaven in the vision is this is how God looks at the world. This is the place from which God looks at the world. And so he's being invited to see things from God's point of view.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. So I've got a big section in the middle of my page.
So, and in that first section, kind of between chapter 1 and chapter 4, we've got these letters to 7 real places on earth.
Yeah.
With real people, real Jesus communities. And it's very much about what's going on in those places. It's the view from the ground. And then chapter 4 switches into, okay, now let's have a look at this from God's point of view.
I see, yeah. Okay, good. So should I be filling anything in yet?
The section between chapter 1 and chapter 4 is, you can call that the view from on the ground.
Yeah.
And then the beginning of chapter 4 is the view from heaven.
Yeah. So where are we going to go next?
Let's start to break down this big section in the middle.
Yeah.
We'll start with 3 rectangles across the page.
Yeah. So three of those. Yeah. And am I filling the whole gap?
Yeah. So the first 2, go across the page. The first 2 are right next to each other. So one underneath the other.
Yeah.
And then a gap.
Yeah.
Of a couple of inches on the page, and then another box across the page.
Okay.
Landscape.
Yeah. And then that will take us to.
Yeah, that takes us to the end of chapter 16, to the beginning of the next section. Then.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
So what are these 3 things though? So chapter 6, we've got a scroll which is sealed with 7 seals, and there's chapter 6 then describes these 6 seals and the opening of those 6 seals. Mm-hmm. Plus, we'll just have a look at in chapter 6 because it's relatively short, so we can spin through it and see how it's structured, ignoring the detail of the content. So chapter 6 starts with, I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say, "Come," and I looked, and behold, a white horse. Its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him. He came out conquering and to conquer. And then it's straight into the second seal. And I heard the second creature say, "Come," and this is a red horse. And then the next verse is straight onto the third seal, and it's a black horse. And then the 7th verse is straight onto the 4th seal, and it's a pale horse. So there's a sort of a grouping of 4. Mm-hmm. So I've just written in this box, these are seals, and there's 4. A group of 4 to start with, plus, and then there's 2 more. There's verse 9, the 5th seal, which is an altar, and then there's a 6th seal, which is an earthquake and various things. We've got to 6 seals.
Yeah.
And we know, the readers, the hearers, know that there are 7 seals. And so you're kind of wanting to get to the 7th seal.
Yeah.
The final, this is going to be the culmination. The important thing is going to happen when you get to 7. And it kind of goes 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Block of 4. And then there's a 5th one. Then there's a 6th one. And it's building this expectation of getting to the end, getting to the 7. And then it stops and the subject changes and there's this interruption, which lasts for the whole of chapter 7.
Right, okay.
So I've drawn a little box in the middle of my oblong for the seals, and that's an interruption.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we get to the 7th seal at the beginning of chapter 8. So there's a pattern there of this group of 7 things. There's a group of 4 of them, then 2 more, but then it doesn't get straight to the end. It interrupts the flow with something else, which when we get to that in the relevant episode, we'll talk about what it means.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the end.
Yeah, so I'm just going to just reflect on that a little bit. So you're sort of saying that the shift of perspective that happens in the book, so come and see, I was in the spirit, and have a look at this in a different way, That's quite fundamental to what the book's trying to say. And that's kind of reflected here a little bit, maybe, in that it sets you up with an expectation of 7 seals, 7, of course, being a sort of Hebrew symbol of completeness. You sort of expect 7 to come. It's like the old 7 times marching round Jericho in the book of Joshua sort of structured, isn't it? And then you're saying, actually, it doesn't come when you expect it. So is that inviting them to have a change of perspective again? Is that all part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we get into the content, we'll see what the purpose of that interruption is.
Right. Okay.
And it's the expectation that's being built up is that we go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and when we get to 7, God will complete his purpose.
Okay.
But there's something that interrupts that. Mm-hmm. There's something that needs to be understood, that needs to be done before that can happen. Okay. I guess is what that's building up. So as we move straight into the next sequence, which starts in chapter 8, it's a sequence of 7 trumpets now. Yeah. And it follows exactly the same pattern. There's a group of 4. Yeah. And then there's a 5th and a 6th. The descriptions are a bit longer this time because the first 4 are in chapter 8, and then the 5th is in chapter 5th and 6th is in chapter 9. And then it doesn't get to the 7th again. There's a break, another break, and this time it's chapters 10 and 11. And then it does get to this 7th trumpet at the end of chapter 11. It's following the same pattern of 4 plus 2, then an interruption, and then the 7th, whatever it is. Now, let's just have a look at how chapter 11 finishes. This is a key thing. So at the end of chapter 11, we've got to the end of, we've done the 7 seals, we've done the 7 trumpets, we've got a description there in verse 19, last verse of chapter 11. Then God's temple, or sanctuary, in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. The thing just to notice there is that God's temple in heaven was open. That phrase. And then we've got chapters 12, 13, 14, there's all sorts of bizarre things going on in there. And we get to chapter 15 and verse 5. And after these various things described in chapter 12, 13, 14, beginning of 15, we get to chapter 15 and verse 5. After this I looked, and the sanctuary, it's the same word as temple in the Greek. Yeah. The sanctuary of the tent of witness in heaven was opened, and out of the sanctuary came 7 plagues. And then we go into this third block that you've drawn with 7 bowls. Yeah. So the reason I think that's interesting is that if you were to imagine Revelation as, written on a scroll, and you took chapter 11, verse 19 and picked it up, and you took chapter 15 and verse 5 and picked it up and put them together, you'd have a big loop of chapters 12, 13 and 14 in the middle. Yeah. Just hanging down. But actually the text would flow straight through, wouldn't it? Mm. Because you finish with God's temple, sanctuary in heaven was open at the end of chapter 11. And then chapter 15, verse 5, the temple is open. Yeah. Yeah, so it's picking up where it left off. Yeah. So it's sort of saying, okay, remember I said this back at the end of chapter 11. Yeah. Now I'm picking up from that point. And you could almost cut out the bits in between. Those bizarre bits, you said. And just join those two. Yeah. And you've got the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and then the 7 bowls. You could just join it together and have it all flowing through. But it doesn't do that. No. We're not advocating cutting those chapters out, are we? No. But what it does suggest is that block in the middle, chapters 12 to 14, are a separate, discrete section. Yeah. So I think in the middle of our big section from chapter 4 to 17, or actually in between the first 2 blocks and the third block, you can put kind of a shaded section across, which is chapters 12 to 14. So this is different. Yeah. What's happening in there is doing something different. It's doing something different. So you've got these 3 sequences of 7, which to all intents and purposes follow on from each other. Yeah. But there's a block in the middle that is appears to be doing something else.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's actually another block of 7. So we can, in terms of description of that bit in the middle, chapters 12 to 14,
Yeah.
there's 7 different things in there. There's another group of 7. The way I describe this section is that it's 7 signs
Yeah.
that sort of chart out the whole history of the opponents in a conflict, and how it starts and how it ends. It starts with a woman and a child being born, and it finishes with a harvest and a grape harvest. So it's starting with Jesus, and then it's ending with the culmination of God's purpose.
Harvest often being a symbol of sort of God's final judgment, isn't it? That's an Old Testament symbol.
From the Old Testament, from Joel. Joel 3.
Yeah.
Comes straight out of language from that. I won't say any more about that middle section.
Yeah. Not yet. A future episode.
I mean, one of the things in that section, actually, in chapter 14, there's 3 angels. So chapter 14, verse 6, has 3 angels that have 3 different things that they proclaim. I think they are introducing the final sections of the book of Revelation.
Okay.
So somewhere in that block that represents chapters 12 to 14, I've got a bubble that says 3 angels inside it.
Okay.
And the first of them, let's read it from verse 6 of chapter 14. I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim. And then verse 7, he said with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of waters. Now, that seems to be pointing forward to the little section about the bowls, because they're poured out on the heaven, the earth, the sea, and the springs or rivers of waters.
Okay, yeah.
So it's saying, okay, there's another section to come, which is about that. And then there's another angel, verse 8, a second follows saying, fallen is Babylon the Great, who made all nations drink with the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. So then after the series of bowls, when we get into chapter 17, we've got the city of Babylon and it falling. Now, I'm not going to try and explain what that might be referring to. And then we've got a third section, so a third angel. Verse 9 says, another angel, a third, followed them, saying, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives a mark on his forehead. So there's these images of a beast and an image. And then the next section, after it's talked about city of Babylon falling, the next section in chapters 19 and 20 is all about dealing with, getting rid of this beast, his image, and a dragon.
Yeah, I see.
And the end of those things. In chapter 14 there, we've got 3 proclamations saying, there are 3 more sections to come. One of them's about these judgments, these bowls being poured out. One of them's about the fall of Babylon. And then the third one is about the beast, the image of the beast, whatever that is. So we're here concentrating on structure rather than understanding what those things are. So, but what you can see from these things, even though we don't necessarily know what these things mean, is how it is interwoven and connected together. This whole text. Yeah,
it's dense, isn't it, and rich.
Yeah.
But all the time it's audible cues, isn't it? I think that's what you're, or if you're reading it, you can pick them up when reading it. So they are cues and hints that you can quite easily pick up on if we're hearing the whole thing in one go, which presumably is how it would have first been read and delivered.
Yeah. So then I think, we're pretty much there now.
Yeah. So we've got 7 bowls, haven't we? Which you've talked about. Do they come in a similar group? So 4 plus 1 and 1, or?
That's a good question. The difference is, so where are they? They're in chapter 16. They certainly have a group of 4 to start with, where things are poured out onto different, the earth, the heaven, the rivers and sea or something. But then it goes into the 5th and the 6th, and the difference this time is there is no interruption.
I see.
So it plows straight into the 7th. It goes straight through.
Yeah.
It's almost as though you've got these 3 sequences, seals, trumpets, and bowls. The first 2 have got something that delays them getting to the end.
Yeah.
But the third group does get through. So it's like, yes, there's something that delays the end coming, but ultimately the end will come.
Yeah.
There will be a time when it does get to the end. And actually, at the end of chapter 16, there's something really interesting. Yeah, let's look at these verses and see what you make of them.
Yeah, go ahead.
So let's go back to chapter 4, verse 5. So this is before any of these sequences of 7, before the seals and the trumpets and the bowls. So what have we got there? So just read chapter 4, verse 5.
Okay, chapter 4, verse 5. From the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder, and before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God.
Okay. So there's lightning and thunder.
Yeah.
And a bit of fire.
Yeah.
Okay. So just hold that thought. And then go to the end of... So when we get to the 7th seal, the end of that first sequence of 7, which is chapter 8 and verse 5.
Okay, chapter 8, verse 5 says, Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth, and there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake.
So what's the difference?
Okay, so there's an earthquake now.
So it's a bit more.
Yeah.
It's a bit more intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty intense anyway.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
But now there's an earthquake as well. And then chapter 11, verse 19, when we get to the end of the trumpets.
Okay, 11:19 says, Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. So so it's even worse.
So it's escalating, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so when it appears again in the end of that bowls sequence, which is a few verses actually, it's verse 17 to 21.
So which chapter are we in?
This is chapter 16.
16, verse 17, yeah, okay. The 7th angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, It is done. And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into 3 parts. The cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found, and great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people, and they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. Yeah, it has escalated. Yeah.
So it's really built. Yeah. And I think this is the kind of thing that you might pick up as you heard this. You know, you hear, okay, bit of rumbling, thunder, lightning, and then there's an earthquake, and then the hail is loaded on top of that, and then, you know, this earthquake like there's never been an earthquake before, hail like there's never been hail before, and this sense of things just building up and escalating.
Yeah.
What that might mean, well,
we need to think that through, don't we?
At some point.
Okay. So,
but it's another example of how it's all woven together and linked in this work of art.
Yeah. Okay. So we're pretty much there, aren't we? I think you've not talked a lot about chapter 21, verse 9, and which that was the final section about coming. Yeah,
the final section it introduces the concept of New Jerusalem.
Yeah,
and it talks about, actually it's interesting in chapter 21. It talks about, I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. So given where we started, what sort of impression do you pick up from that ending?
So that's really interesting, because he had to be brought up to heaven to to have God's perspective. But so at the end, God comes down effectively. So there's a reuniting of heaven and earth, isn't there?
The book starts with, okay, we've got a view from down on the ground, the lives of real people and their difficulties.
Yeah.
And then a view from heaven, and it's all kind of glorious and amazing. And they're being brought together.
Yeah.
And they're being united at the end of this new heaven and earth, you know, which is not really a new planet. It's not that sort of language.
Yeah.
It's about, I suppose, if we thought about it from the beginning of the book as, you know, man's viewpoint from down on earth and God's viewpoint, it's a bringing together of those two perspectives.
Yeah.
And God dwelling with man. And there's all sorts of language of the Garden of Eden and the temple language in chapters 21 and 22, trees and fruits and rivers and so on. So a fantastic allusion, the density of allusions back to Old Testament imagery.
Yeah, that really ties it in with the rest of the biblical story, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So I don't know what my diagram's going to look like compared to yours. that was good. Yeah, so getting your head around the structure is helpful because when we come and interpret it, we're not going to be sort of chasing down paths that the book isn't trying to get you to go down. That's I think really helpful. It's given us a framework for understanding the book.
Yeah, and although we haven't gone anywhere near, with the content of the seals and the trumpets and these different beasts and dragons, and I mean, what do you think a hearer picking up on some of those structural markers might get from that, and start to think about what impression they get and the message of this book?
So I think the big thing is that the different, or having to reorientate your perspective to God's perspective, I think is something that's coming out.
Yeah.
Quite what that might mean, I'm not sure yet until we sort of delve into the detail. I'm sure there's probably quite a lot in that. But then there's all this kind of anticipation, but it doesn't come, and it keeps sort of falling away. And we have, in the first episode, we talked a lot about the background to it being a community of people anticipating and wondering and waiting. So I can see how that is going to really sort of chime with them. It's talking to their situation, isn't it? Which I think helps.
Yeah, and it's giving them a message that there's a lot of time, there's a lot of things to happen before the end comes, before what you're expecting, the return of Jesus, the kingdom of God, the joining together of heaven and earth happens. There's a lot of things that you need to go through before that. Almost the warning of Jesus in Matthew 24, isn't it? The Olivet prophecy. When you see these things, don't think that I'm about to appear. It's just the beginning. Yeah. So it's setting them up, preparing them for the long haul, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I suppose it's how you behave is going to be sort of touched on in this, isn't it? Or how you conduct your life whilst waiting, and whilst the response that you give to the things that you go through is going to be touched on. So, okay, brilliant. So let's. Are we there? I think we're done with this one.
I think so.
Yeah, good. Okay, thanks, Paul. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And I don't know whether you've found a chance to doodle while you were listening, but if you did, send us your doodles. It'd be brilliant to see if Paul's explanatory.
That would be great, because they're bound to be better than mine.
yeah. There you go. Well, it'd be really good to see if you've managed to sketch out the structure of Revelation just from this episode, and whether or not that helped you. So get in touch on Facebook. Find us at BibleFeed. Or biblefeed.org on our website, and you can email us info@biblefeed.org.
So I think we've demonstrated that trying to describe diagrams on a podcast just doesn't really work. But you can check out the show notes on the BibleFeed podcast page to see my original drawing of the structure of Revelation, to compare yours, and a slightly more detailed explainer video, which hopefully makes it all clear. Take a look and let us know what you think.
You've been listening to the Bible Feed podcast. Thanks for joining us. We're always keen to hear what you think, hear your questions or subjects you'd like to discuss. So get in touch with us on our Facebook page or send a message from our webpage at biblefeed.org and be part of the journey.